We will be starting again quite soon. If Laura Fandrich is in the room, she's awaited on board here. If she's not there yet, she might join anyway. All right? All right, everybody. It's a pleasure being back here on board to moderate this third session. After the two superb sessions that we had, we have a lot of pressure for our speakers. I'm happy to welcome at this round table Susana Puerto Gonzalez from the ILO, Murteza Rafi, whom we heard earlier this morning from the Bangladesh Global National Business and Disability Network. We also will have Patrick Romzek from Cisco, who will be digitally on the screen and showcasing a very interesting presentation. And we are waiting for Laura Fandrich from the Global Apprenticeship Network, who will take the floor once she's there. So maybe to give you some insight, we've dealt this morning with digital accessibility. We just heard a lot about disability inclusive marketing, and everybody was happy to see new very communicative examples. Where do we have to start now to address the skills gap, which is the next biggest question in terms of inclusion of people with disabilities? We'll take first the example of the Bangladesh network. Murteza, I'm sure you have interesting examples to share.
Absolutely. Thanks for the floor. If I could just get my slides up.
Before you start,
Yeah.
I almost forgot something. The Slido application is online, and you are able to register your participation. There is a code, which is, I will remind it, it's 3194, 3194, and it will be open until quarter past. So, and we are expecting from your participation and results forthcoming at the end of the session. Sorry, Murteza, the floor is yours now again.
No problem. Thank you. How do I move the slides? Yes. Okay. Okay, perfect. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Bruce said, I'm Murteza Khan from the Bangladesh Business and Disability Network. Absolutely delighted to be here this afternoon. Of course, we're talking about the skills gap. I will be talking obviously from the Bangladesh perspective. Quickly, my presentation will cover the context in Bangladesh very briefly. We'll look at some demand and supply side initiatives that are at once looking at the skills gap, but also disability inclusion, and of course a brief about our network, what we've been doing over the last year, and our activities. So Bangladesh is a population of 160 million people. We're one of the most densely populated countries in the world, and we have about 16 million people with disabilities living there. Obviously, the barriers that persist in a lot of developing countries, the soft attitudinal barriers persist, along with the hard infrastructure barriers that are excluding people with disabilities from entering society and, of course, the workforce. Our GDP is 220 billion, and we're growing at 6.6%, so we're one of the fastest growing economies in the world, too. So the need to close the skills gap is actually very important for us as we look to keep up with our development. Some of the key drivers in our economy are the apparel industry, agriculture, manufacturing and services, and we're slowly starting to diversify our manufacturing base. Now, if we look at the skills gap, there's sort of two things to look at in the Bangladesh context. One would be the difficulty to fill vacancies, not enough candidates for certain positions. And we see that this particularly is applicable for white-collar, mid-management, upper management jobs. And the second would, of course, be the skills gap in terms of having underskilled workers. They're still being employed, but they don't have quite the desired skill level that is required to get perhaps the most efficient output. And this is a struggle struggle that we see on the floor level, so really with more blue-collared workers. A result of the skills gap is definitely a reliance on expatriate workers, especially at the upper management and mid-management levels. So that's, of course, leading to a lack of talent development within the country. So some of the things to consider here, it's not sort of a one-size-fits-all in terms of the sectors of the economy. What we see is in the apparel sector, for example, you see a lot more skilled labor available because this has been a sector that's been fairly well developed in the country, versus emerging sectors like shipbuilding or manufacturing in slightly more technical fields, definitely a much greater shortage. And this is obviously a result of these sectors being newer, not enough management training institutions, etc. And of course, the training of trainers programs need to be strengthened, and establishment of standards and benchmarking, because often what's happening is people are getting through educational institutions, but industry is unable to sort of properly assess exactly what skill level they possess and where they would fit into the programs. And of course, one of the key things is, of course, to bridge the demand and supply side collaboration. To that end, as far as disability inclusion is concerned, there have been some movements to try to incentivize employers, and also some work done from the government side. If we look at our Department of Technical Education, which controls the vocational training institutes that do skills development, for the first time, disability inclusion is part of their performance systems. So that means the schools, the principals, the instructors are getting assessed on how many people with disabilities are being included in their systems. Our Ministry of Education has also set a 5% quota for people with disabilities in these vocational training systems. But again, the enforcement of the quota is somewhat limited. So there's still a reliance on NGOs and disabled people's organizations, which have more of a grassroots reach, to deliver a lot of the skills development and education that's happening for people with disabilities. And of course, the pathway to employment still remains a challenge with a lack of inclusive education and, of course, skills training, internships, and apprenticeships. That being said, I can tell you about a few sort of pilots and models that have been working in the economy where we see interesting demand and supply side collaborations. What you see up on the slide is of a company called Interfab, who are supplying to brands globally from Hugo Boss, Tommy Hilfiger, etc. So they partnered up with a government training institute, a disability NGO, with technical assistance from the ILO. And what was interesting here is to address their skills gap, the industry helped to sort of design the training program, which was conducted by the Government Training Institute with help from the disability NGO CRP off-site, following which there was 8 months on-the-site training so that the employees with disabilities, after having the training, could get properly inducted into the workforce, followed by accreditation and getting that certification. So this was, again, establishing that standard in terms of this employee has attained a certain level of skills, which becomes marketable. You can then go to other industries or factories within your same sector. So there are similar models that have happened, but again, as I was saying, our apparel industry being more developed, we see more interventions there. But this can sort of be scaled up in different industries. And if I talk about my own company's involvement, well, along with BBDN, I also work for the Adecco Foundation, and we collaborated again with the Disability NGO to set up this center where people are receiving therapeutic services, physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, prosthetics and orthotics. So it's definitely a way to connect with people with disabilities in one place, and of course followed by vocational training where people are then helped to either placed in jobs in industry or to start their own businesses in computer training, electronics repair work, and sewing machine operations. So where does our network fit into all this? About a year ago, under the Bangladesh Employers Federation, we were launched by our Honorable Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, with the DG of the ILO present. And since then, we've tried to bring together the disability inclusive employers and also those who want to become inclusive, because no forum like that existed till now in Bangladesh. And a lot of what's being facilitated is knowledge sharing and of best practices, policies, and pilots such as the one I told you about that often other parts of industry are unaware of. And of course, we're trying to create those linkages between demand and supply, the way I've shown you. And in a lot of cases, companies are a bit at a loss in terms of where to start. And this is where leveraging the knowledge and the expertise of our development partners really helps greatly. And another big piece of what we're trying to do is advocacy for the enforcement of the laws and policies that are already there. The legal infrastructure is there in place to a certain extent, but it just needs to get enforced to that next bit. I know a lot of these names won't mean much to you. Currently we have 31 members, but we should have 32. As I was saying earlier today, Telenor's local subsidiary Grameenphone has joined. But what's exciting about our membership is they are from very different sectors. So we have pharmaceuticals, banking, some from the apparel industry, Coca-Cola's local office. And next to them, we also have some of the largest NGOs in the country, such as BRAC and CRP, USEP. So what's exciting is I think we have the players in place who can sort of work together and really have impact on a countrywide scale through using, again, the resources that have already been developed by our partners. And in terms of what we've been doing so far, a big component is, of course, sensitization and HR professionals training. Often those negative attitudes do also permeate into the workforce, so trying to raise awareness about sensitization at the workplace is an important component. We're also holding seminars in different parts of the country to try to decentralize the efforts. It's quite common that these kind of initiatives always stay in the capital, but we're making a very concerted effort to partner with chambers of commerce and spread the work. We're also planning things like job fairs in December, which are targeted only for people with disabilities. And a lot of employers have already come forward to do recruitment drives. Data is obviously a big weakness at the moment, so we're taking on research projects to really sort of target more of our initiatives going forward in terms of where are the gaps currently that need to be addressed. We're also looking to motivate employers, so instituting things like awards for the most inclusive employer is something that we have in the works, and trying to develop further services to help companies that want to become inclusive. So obviously the sessions earlier today definitely gave me some ideas in terms of digital accessibility, etc., that can definitely be offered. And we're also pursuing partnerships such as with ILO and other development partners to take our initiative forward. So that's where we stand today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these insights from the field and from countries where companies operate. That it happens there. Now we will turn to the digital part of the meeting with the participation of our colleague from Cisco, Patrick Romzek, who's an executive consultant. I'm sure it will connect somehow, and we will see him on the screen through WebEx, I think. And he has a very comprehensive presentation on what can be done at the company level in terms of skills gap. Is it okay with the technique? Go.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello? Yeah? You
Yes.
can hear me? Okay, great. Well, good afternoon. It is truly a pleasure for me to be here. I'm sorry I couldn't travel to the beautiful city of Geneva to be there with you. I really would have liked to have been there live, but unfortunately, my business activities prevented me from being there. In any case, it's great to be able to join you through technology. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. I do have some material that I wanted to share with you. Cisco, as you probably know, is a global telecommunications company. So Cisco is the largest provider of telecommunications solutions in the world. We're in many, many, many countries, all of your countries for sure. And so it's appropriate that I would use technology to share this presentation with you, because one of the things that we're doing at Cisco is leveraging technology to transform the lives of people with disabilities. And I know, Bruce, that we want to talk here a little bit about the skills gap, and it's quite interesting. Hopefully you find this interesting. That's one of the challenges that we've had at Cisco as we've embarked on a strategy to really drive accelerated employment of people with disabilities, and thereby empowering them and transforming their lives. We all know about the benefits in our own lives of having a job, of having a reason in something productive that we can do. The same for people with disabilities. So we believe strongly that employment is an opportunity for transformation for people's lives, and that's an area of major focus for us. So I'll talk very quickly about what is it that we were trying to do, how did this project start, what was some of the problems that we saw. The program that we run at Cisco is called Life Changer. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing, but I want to spend a few minutes about what we learned, because it really is relevant to this whole topic about skills gap and what are we doing about it at Cisco. Most of you know about the unemployment of people with disabilities globally. I know several of the speakers ahead of me talked about this. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I always show this slide, no matter what group I speak to, even if it is a group of folks like this that really understand the challenges of people with disabilities around employment. But I think it's really important that we all realize how absolutely terrible it is. You know, we talk about a lot of things that are really important, whether it's to the world or to society or specific groups of people. And rarely do we talk at a global stage, Deborah talked about this a little earlier, about people with disabilities. It's sort of the forgotten 15% of the world's population. It's absolutely unacceptable in a civilized world that 85% or 80% of people with disabilities would not be employed. And that these are US statistics, but 85% of people with ambulatory disabilities in the United States, only an ambulatory disability, don't have a job, don't have a full-time job. It's really unacceptable when you think about it. And this was what we were trying to address with this Life Changer project. We know that a lot of money has been spent over many years to address this problem, and frankly, the unemployment rate globally hasn't changed a lot. Certainly in the US, it hasn't changed a lot. In fact, the unemployment rate is going up for people with disabilities. While we employ more of them, more and more people are being diagnosed with disabilities, so the actual unemployment rate is going up. So we had this very simple idea of using technology to change the way we looked at work. And the notion was work is something you do, not a place that you go. Using the kind of technology that I'm using right here, our early idea was, could we leverage collaboration and communication technology, which is now available virtually on a global basis, and cloud deliveries to enable people to work from anywhere?
Pat, this is Stefan. Just for you to know,
Hi,
we can see you and can hear you perfectly, but we can't see the presentation. I don't know whether you can do anything at your end, but just for you to know, we see you and we hear you, but we don't see the presentation.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Stefan, I'm sharing it. So you can see my video? All right, let me try to stop sharing and reshare. So can you see this now?
Not still not. We see you, but we don't see the screen. It's better to see you, though.
Oh, thank you. I'm not so sure about that. I think people would probably rather see my slides. I'm not really sure why we're not sharing. because I am sharing. Let me try one other thing here. Maybe it's connecting with my video screen. I've got multiple video options here. Can you see the screen now?
Pat, we have the presentation here, so we can put, instead of seeing you for a moment, we can put the PowerPoint from our side, and you can just perhaps tell us to move on slide, if that's okay.
That would be great.
We measure from here.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why it's not sharing. But yeah, that'd be great if you could do that. Again, I'll share my screen here. I'm sharing it. Oh, there, I can see it. I can see it now, and I can see what you're doing. Yeah,
that's good.
If you would move ahead to the third. Well, actually, move 2 slides ahead. Oops, now it's not sharing. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do, but it's not on full screen.
Okay, I'll put it on full screen. Can you see it now?
Yes, it's all good.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Appreciate the heads up. So the idea that we had, as I said, was work is something you do, not a place that you go, and allowing us to use this kind of technology to be able to have people work from anywhere and eliminate one of the core barriers to employment for a lot of people with disabilities, frankly, which is just getting to work. I mean, many places in the world, this is a big challenge. It was a very simple idea that has had very profound impact at Cisco. So what we've now done is expanded the notion. We've learned a lot through this process, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we'll talk about the skills gap because that was one of the key learnings that we had. But what we ultimately did was we used technology to expand and innovate employment for people with disabilities. We implemented process change and strong executive support to embed disability hiring into the culture and fabric of the company. And most importantly, as we started to do this, we started to have a great deal of success, but we recognized there were gaps in terms of the skill sets and the numbers of people that we were trying to hire. So we are now really focused on developing and building the skills and talent supply of people with disabilities to work at Cisco. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. There's a new program that we have. So we started 2 years ago. This was an idea. We did a pilot, a prototype in California. We then did pilots last year in San Jose, California, Bangalore, India, Brussels, Belgium, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and a couple of other small locations that I didn't mention here. We developed a business case. So I know one of the other panels talked about the importance of business case. Business case is really important. We have a very compelling business case, which I'll share with you in a minute. So we use this very extensively with our executive team because if they're not moved by the fact that this is the right thing to do, oftentimes they're moved by it's really good for our business. It's both. It's both the right thing to do and really good for our business, as I'll talk about further. And what we're doing now is really embedding this into the culture and processes across the entire company. And here's the business case. So we benchmark the people that we hired. We've now hired about 100 people globally. We have another 140 targeted in the next year all over the world, primarily India, China, parts of Europe, and a couple of locations in the U.S. What we learned was the productivity of the people that we hired was more than double the productivity of their coworkers in the same roles. Now, this was based on a benchmark study that we did of one of our work groups where we hired quite a number of people with disabilities, many of them with visual disabilities, actually. And what we found is their productivity was actually higher than their coworkers. Now, there's many people that talk about productivity and talk about the benefits of hiring people with disabilities, but we have an example at Cisco that we've benchmarked, that we have the statistics, and we use this all the time in our dialogue internally. And the reason is, as I said earlier, if you're not moved to hire people with disabilities because it's the right thing to do, or it's good for them, or it's good for society, do it because it's good for your business, because it is. It's both. We have lower costs, lower turnover, lower error rates, lower absenteeism, and we also pay less in government levies, subsidies, penalties, and fines, whatever you might want to refer to it. Everyone has a different name for it. They're all the same. we're paying money in lots of markets as other global multinationals are as well, because we don't meet disability hiring targets. But more importantly, there's a huge brand benefit. Deborah talked about this earlier. We recognize the brand benefit, and we've just started looking at how this can help our brand at Cisco, to be honest. There's a lot more work to be done here, and actually Deborah and Rue Global is helping us with this. But I think it's also important that not only is this good for society and good for people, good for our business, it's also extremely good for our workforce. What do I mean by that? These quotes on the right-hand side of the screen are from one of our global leaders in our technical services organization. We started by hiring some people in our technical services organization in both Brussels and Bangalore, and what we found is their productivity was much higher than their coworkers, and the people that we hired with disabilities had much greater customer empathy. Because of the challenges they've encountered in their own lives, they have a great attitude, they work really hard, they're very loyal to their team, and they're tremendous with customers. So this success is now leading us to drive further success. We've been recognized by some global organizations for the work that we're doing here, but we know it's only the beginning. And we're just starting now to share this with customers and other partners. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about not just what we succeeded in doing, because I've talked a little bit about that. I want to talk about the barriers, because we identified a number of core barriers when we embarked on this idea of hiring people with disabilities. And I use the analogy and the comparison of it's like peeling back an onion. You know, oftentimes you hear people with disabilities say, nobody wants to hire me. I'd love to work, but nobody wants to hire me. And then you hear employers say, I'd love to hire people with disabilities, but they don't have the skills we need. The truth of the matter is both sides are true. Both groups are accurate. It is a complex issue. And what we found at Cisco is there are layers of barriers to employment for people with disabilities. Sort of at the outer layer is this notion of misperceptions that business leaders don't think people with disabilities can do the job. They can't do the job in the same way. And so they sort of tend to screen these folks out of the workforce or out of the recruiting process. The way we overcame that at Cisco was through extensive education and executive support, primarily at the executive level. We didn't do as much education at the manager level until we had some success and in some specific markets. We started at the executive level. But once we overcame that and we had recognition that this was probably a good thing to do, then you see access issues. There are many issues of access to employment. So even if you want to employ people with disabilities, how do they get to work? How do they participate in the workforce? Can they participate in the workforce in the same way? Technology becomes an enabler here. This technology that we're using right now is one of the ways that we overcame employment access issues and eliminated needs, some of the other challenges. But once we did that, we saw there were a lot of process barriers. People with disabilities oftentimes wouldn't even get to our recruiting process. So we had to change and do some process redesign, which we did, to enable people with disabilities to access employment at Cisco. And one of the ways we did that is started doing a more targeted hiring, looking at specific roles that were very well aligned to the talent pool. But once you overcome all those barriers, you do run into bias. There are people that have bias, that have this idea that somehow people with disabilities can't do the job. That's a bias. If you present them with all the facts and they still don't recognize that there's an opportunity, sometimes it's bias. Business case is key to overcoming this obstacle. Why? Because these people aren't moved. They're not driven. Their behavior isn't changed by the fact that it's the right thing to do. But they are motivated by it's the good thing to do for their business. So if they're not moved by the social impact, they tend to be moved by the business impact. That's been extremely effective for us. But then once we overcame all those barriers and we started hiring a lot of people, what we found is that many of the candidates actually lack the skills that we would want at a place like Cisco. You know, we pride ourselves on recruiting the top of the talent pool in the technology industry, from universities, from nonprofit, from other organizations. And what we found is that many of the people with disabilities didn't go to, some of the top technology schools in the world, or maybe don't have a lot of work experience. This was a real challenge for us. And the way we're overcoming it, while we hired quite a number of people, it became harder and harder to find enough talent. So we're building our own talent pool now. We're building our own supply chain of talent because there is a giant pool of people with disabilities that want to work. Many of them lack the skills or background, education, or experiences that would allow them to get a job at Cisco. So we're building those experiences for them in a program that we call the Life Changer Talent Incubation Program. So when you take it all together, there's a number of barriers here, and it's overly simplistic to think that it's just one. It's overly simplistic for people with disabilities to think, oh, it's just because nobody wants to hire me. Or for an employer to think, well, they don't have the skills we need. The reality of it is, it's a complex issue that requires a comprehensive solution, and that's what we're doing at Cisco. So we've started a program that we refer to as our Life Changer Talent Incubation Program. We are using the Cisco Networking Academy curriculum. There are 9,000 Cisco Networking Academies in the world, schools and universities all over the world that are using the Cisco Networking curriculum to develop a skill set for people to get jobs. Why couldn't we use this same curriculum and program to enable people with disabilities to get jobs? That's exactly what we're doing. So we took that curriculum, we brought it in-house, and we actually have Cisco instructors that are running an accelerated Cisco Network Academy, bringing people with disabilities in intentionally. It's an intentional academy focused on people with disabilities, delivered online so they can take it from their home. They come into the program, 6 months later they come out with a certification and we hire them. This has been very effective for us. We've now had about 70 people go through the program. We've hired every single one of the people that graduated. So I don't want to take too much time here, but I want to spend just to summarize some key points. What we learned in our experience at Cisco, executive sponsorship is really important and sort of foundational. But you can't just have executive support. You got to have middle managers, we call them work streams, that are actually driving change. Executives mandating something is not enough. Grassroots activity is not enough. You need both. That's what we're doing at Cisco. We're focusing on the best opportunities. We're not necessarily just simply trying to bring people into the company and put them in a giant pool of candidates. We're targeting specific roles in specific locations that we know are a great fit for people with disabilities. We're leveraging the business case to drive real impact and to drive behavior change amongst our leadership team. We're building talent commitments. We're starting with specific roles and locations and getting commitments from our senior leaders to say, I'm going to hire people intentionally with disabilities as a preferred strategy for some of these roles. It's a preferred strategy. It's not just, if they apply, I'll evaluate them. We are targeting specific roles and locations to employ people with disabilities, and we're building a supply of talent to match those opportunities. So we're defining the opportunities, getting a commitment to them, intentionally recruiting people with disabilities into those roles, and building the talent pool to match the skills needed in those roles. And then we're communicating what we're doing internally and across the company. This has been very effective for us. So I'll just kind of build this out. So to summarize, we think this is a significant opportunity to not only impact our workforce and our culture, but frankly, our business and our brand. We think there's a huge pool of talent here at a time that we're looking for talent all over the world. There's a huge pool of talent here that's been untapped. That if we provide them the right opportunities, the right education and experiences, they can be extremely productive members of our workforce. So we have a company-wide focus. We're driven by our desire to make a difference, but also focused on innovation, doing things differently as a way to make a difference, using technology with our strategic focus, process and culture change to really make impact. And we think there's significant benefit to our business, our workforce, and our brand. And at the end of the day, we can't think of a better way to embody the Cisco vision. For 30 years, our vision has been to change the way the world works, lives, plays, and learns. We can't think of a better way to do that than what we're doing with Project Life Changer. So let me pause there. Sorry if we had a little gap in the beginning with the prezo, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if we have time. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to you, Bruce.
Thanks, Pat. This was a very clear demonstration of what can be done and I'm sure the full audience has appreciated. Please, so you can hear.
Thank you.
We'll take the questions at the end of the session. Thanks, Pat, and we'll get back to you if there are targeted remarks. Now I will shift to Susana Puerto Gonzalez from the ILO, who's the youth employment specialist within this large organization. Thank you, Susana, and we can't wait to hear for you, because youth is hope and change.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm probably the only non-expert on disability, but I'm very happy to bring my expertise on youth employment and seek synergies between our passions. Pat was mentioning just before how important and one of the lessons for Cisco was executive sponsorship and work stream leadership. So I'm the work stream leadership. You heard this morning my boss, Director General, talking about ILO's take and effort in promoting youth employment globally. And one of those efforts is through the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth. And in particular, he mentioned how we together can boost digital skills of young people, including young people, and particularly young people with disabilities. So my presentation today, it will be first discussing a little bit, introducing to you the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth, explaining what is it about, the objective, and other things, and then I will try to jump into the topic of disability and disabled youth, and what I know about what works in improving labor market outcomes of youth, vis-a-vis the little evidence we have on disabled youth, but we'll try to see together, and from the very many experiences you have shared today, how we can boost knowledge and knowledge sharing, particularly about different ways of supporting young people with disabilities in the world of work. So, can you put it up? Okay, so the challenge. This is the Youth Employment Challenge. So today there is a lot of attention on young people, from different political situations. Since 2010, since the economic crisis, there has been a lot of attention on young people and how we can improve their pathways towards decent work. So yet there is a lot of fragmentation in these efforts. So this is a challenge that makes it difficult for us to create an impact globally. Another challenge is, is more around the data. No? So we have 71 million young people unemployed around the world, and this talks about the quantity of jobs. But one of the most serious challenges is the quality of those jobs. There are about 160 million young people that are working but living in poverty. So this really sets the full picture of the challenge. It's not about only unemployment, and many times we fall into that trend or mistake of thinking about the challenge of young people like not having jobs. There are so many young people employed, but they don't have a salary, or they are working part-time, or they are not recognized in their companies. So we are up against that challenge. Globally, youth unemployment is 3 times that of adults unemployment. So these are some of the figures. Now, thinking about this challenge, the UN system as a whole came together in 2016, and under the lead of the ILO and launched by our Director General, it designed and devised and launched the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth. The objective is to scale up action and impact on youth employment, bringing together all those many efforts happening on youth employment, capitalizing on those efforts, the lessons learned, for example, what we heard from Cisco just now, or the experiences from Bangladesh, bringing all these different experiences so that we together can capitalize and increase the action and the impact. So to do that, we want to create alliances. And for me, being here in front of you, it's part of that process, is getting the word out and seeking synergies across our networks to find commonalities in our target groups. I just lost my PowerPoint, but thank you. So the second aspect is the action, enhancing that action on youth employment through many different types of interventions to address the skills gap. Many times we talk about training, but there are many other opportunities and types of interventions that exist to facilitate the transition of young people into employment. Enhancing that knowledge, bringing all these different good practices that we have heard today, and synergizing resources, particularly domestic resources that have been allocated to youth employment in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as international resources that can be pulled together to promote youth employment. The global initiative is regarded as the overarching platform for youth employment within the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So that gives us a lot of opportunities to link to the agenda, to capture actions from our partners so that they are reflected in progress towards the achievement of the agenda. Now, these are it's a visualization of the partners within the global initiative, and the diversity of the actors that we see are playing a very strong role on youth employment today. So governments have a very central role, but of course the private sector, foundations, the academia, the media, as it was discussed before, we all play a very strong role. Youth organizations, young leaders that are bringing their passion and their innovation towards the main goal of supporting this transition towards decent work. Now, we have identified a series of thematic priorities. DG this morning talked about our work on digital skills for youth, and across the board we have identified different ways, different thematic priorities through which we can support young people. Quality apprenticeships, and I'm not sure if Laura is joining, but the Global Apprenticeship Network particularly invests heavily in connecting companies around quality apprenticeships and other forms of work-based training, supporting young people in fragile situations, fragility be it because of conflict or because of natural disasters, youth in the rural economy, supporting the transition of young people to the formal economy, because many times young people are employed but are they fall in the informal economy. They don't have a contract, and there are many invisible ways in which young people are working, but they are not recognized. Green jobs for youth, youth entrepreneurship and self-employment, and particularly this last thematic priority focuses on youth that are 15 to 17 years old, which is one of the most vulnerable pockets among young people, and are, on top of that, that they are working in hazardous occupations. So this is in a nutshell the global initiative on decent jobs for youth, what we do. Let me just keep it there 1 second. Right now, behind the initiative, we have 22 entities of the UN system, and I'm very happy to see one of my colleagues representing the International Telecommunications Union here. But this is an initiative that crosses the UN system and touches across the different mandates of different agencies and brings and capitalizes on their competitive and comparative advantages so that they can input into these thematic priorities. Now, youth with disabilities. It's very hard to find data, real updated data to tell you about what is the challenge of young people with disabilities in the labor market. We know that there are about 200 million youth with disabilities, most of them in the developing world. We know that there seems to be a link between poverty, access to education, and disability. In other words, disabled youth are more likely to be poor and more likely to have low levels of education. And perhaps those low levels of education talk about some of the skills shortages that Pat and Murteza mentioned before, but in relation to the skills gap. We also know that particularly among young women with disabilities, there are a lot of barriers, attitudinal barriers, physical, informational barriers. There is a lot of stereotyping that limit particularly young women's access to decent jobs. And we also know that even educated young women with disabilities take longer time to find a job. So this last bullet point is what brings me to talk about the other side of the skills gap. Many times we talk about the skills gap as talent shortage, as young people or employers saying we don't find the skills we're looking for in the pool of youth with and without disabilities. So we don't find them. But at the same time, we have many young people that are highly educated, but doing jobs that are below their qualifications. This is what we call over-educated. And we know that there are many young people with disabilities that are over-educated, that are carrying out jobs that are below their capacities and their capabilities. So just to mention that there are those two sides to the skills gap or to the skills mismatch. I put this report from 3IE, it's from last month, and it's a systematic review about interventions to support adults with disabilities in the labor market. I put this one because it's really the only one I found in relation to disability and the labor market. And when we talk about systematic reviews, this is sort of the most rigorous review of the literature that you can find that touches on a very particular topic. So this report found only 14 studies looking at a period of 20 years. Only 14 studies were looking at outcomes, labor market outcomes of different interventions that were delivered to adults with disabilities. And they basically say, that there is a lot of variations in these studies and we can't really say what works. So I think this is very important because it's a call for more evidence in your field, in the field of disabilities, for youth, for adults. I mean, this was a study for adults, but it's really an example of why it is important to continue investing in the evidence. Now, on our site, we published in June a systematic review as well that looks at youth employment interventions only. In our field, there is much more evidence. In the disability field, there were 14 studies. In our field, we found 113 studies. And that, let's say, vast evidence helped us to find some commonalities and some lessons. So basically what we found is that investing in young people pays off. Youth employment programs, from skills training to entrepreneurship for young people, wage subsidies, public works, employment services for young people, they drive positive labor market outcomes among young people. There are different factors that play a role. We didn't find any particular role in the type of intervention, so I'm not saying that skills training will work best in addressing skills mismatches or entrepreneurship here or there. What we see is that there is a very strong role in how the programs are designed and delivered. So we find a very strong role, for example, of programs that tailor their services to young people. In this case, for example, if they tailor their services and their curriculum to young people with disability, they will have a better chance of improving the labor market outcomes of these youth. We also found an important role of involving the private sector in the delivery of these services, of bringing together different services, for example, in the case of training, combining in classroom with on-the-job training, or bringing services like childcare, transportation subsidies, having a package so that it really facilitates young people's participation in these programs. And I mentioned the importance of evaluating, and let's say it's not a cross-cutting evaluation of a year after the program. Long-term evaluation also is important to capture the performance of our interventions and our investments in the longer term. And lastly, which I believe it is also mentioned by you, is the importance of linking our supply side interventions with the demand side. It's not only about building human capital, at the same time it's important to boost and push the private sector, the governments, and whoever creates the most jobs in a particular context to continue investing and creating new jobs for young people. So just to close, the global initiative is, as I mentioned before, has different types of partners and is open to collaboration with different companies that are looking particularly into how to improve labor market outcomes of youth. In that regard, we have an engagement platform that will be launched next month, and that will help us capture the different commitments from organizations towards youth employment. This is some of the, I think I passed my time, but this is some of the contact info, and I will be happy to take questions if any. Thank you.
Thank you, Susana. Well, fortunately, we have some more time. Since Laura just called and said she's sick today, so we have some spare room, which is quite unusual in this kind of meeting. What I get from the three speakers we had today is it's really a call to action, whether it's at the national level in terms of return on investment and initiatives such as the one you just described, Susana, where you have different stakeholders working together with the same goal, and elements of proof. That's really something that is always required to be able to do a proper demonstration. Did you do the Slido questions? We will switch to that. Just think of your questions and answers that will come just after this Slido moment. So, I discover everything. So, we had 22 participants, and to address the skills gap of companies or organizations through disability inclusion practices, we should focus on collaboration with organizations of persons with disabilities and NGOs. I think it's a good feedback to this specific organization we run today. But you see that the gaps are narrow between the other items. Is there another one? No. Okay. It's the main one. So, who wants to start? Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I'm Tiziana from Leona Cesce Disability. I just wanted to, it's not exactly a question, it's more a reflection, I think. I was recently at a global summit in Washington that was on youth in general, and disadvantaged youth, not specific youth with disability, but I think a lot of the conversations that emerge there are relevant to this last conversation that we're having. And I think it's good to hear that, and certainly I've spoken in the past with Cisco, with Patrick, and I knew a lot about their program. I think it's good that it's emerging that companies and just businesses in general realize that there is a skill gap and that we need to do something about meeting that. For persons with disabilities, I'm from disadvantaged groups in general. One of the strong conversations that emerged at this summit was the some companies, so particularly in the millennial, in the young people, and in some of the sort of modern IT companies, a lot of people are now looking for general talent. So they have sort of their starting point, their entry point, has changed. They're questioning whether they need a degree at all. Not let alone a degree in a specific area that is relevant to the business, but they are questioning, actually, do we need a degree at all? Do we need a certain level of education beyond the general, literacy and numeracy? And it was a very powerful conversation because he opened up a lot of doors, I think, and quite a few of the company there were committed to actually get the talent and build on it. And there was a good example, actually, it was from Accenture, Cecile. They were thinking about if we hire with the right qualifications, we get 2 years out of them. If we sort of looked at that differently, we could get 4 or 5 years out of someone, and for them it would actually make sense in the investment. So I'm just a reflection that sort of calls up in going, if you like, a step further.
Thank you. Do you want to? Maybe.
No, just a quick reference to the topic that was not addressed by our missing speaker, but I just also want us to be aware that there is a global apprenticeship network that was established a few years ago. It's hosted by the International Organization of Employers, which is very closely connected to the ILO. And I think it's important that we find ways in which to connect the work that we are doing on disability with the work that others are doing. And that's why we invited Susana to be here with us. That's why we invited Laura from the Global Apprenticeship Network, which in fact has as among its partners IBM, Accenture, and Adecco Group. In fact, your boss, Bruce, is also the chair of the Global Apprenticeship Network. But my question is always to these colleagues is, how much are you thinking about youth with disabilities in the Global Apprenticeship Network and all that? Huh? And I think we have a challenge there, but we also need you as companies that play an active role. I think Cisco is quite involved also in some of the work on digital skills. I think it's important that those companies that are involved in these mainstream, let's say, youth initiatives, and I would define apprenticeship also very much as a youth initiative, to help us build that bridge between those mainstream youth initiatives and our disability-specific initiative, because very often those bridges are not being established. So that's a bit of a call for action, as you were saying, also for you as companies that can play a role in putting disability higher on these mainstream youth agendas. Thank you.
Stefan, this is Pat. Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Pat
Bruce, can you hear me?
Pat has some remarks. Yes, we can hear you, Pat.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you. Stefan, I agree with you, and we'd love to be more involved in the global apprenticeship network, because I really think there is an opportunity here. I've talked to quite a number of other technology companies about sort of what we're doing and is our experience unique, and it's not unique. Most technology companies are really seeking talent. And here's a giant talent pool that with the right strategy and approach through training and apprenticeship programs, we can enable them for employment. I think the point that was made from the young lady from Leonard Cheshire, we are working with Leonard Cheshire around sourcing candidates for some of the markets where we're hiring people. And the question about do technology companies, is a 4-year degree still sort of required? I mean, I think that was kind of the core of the question. What I would tell you is that from a Cisco point of view anyway, we do look for higher education experience, and I'm not going to say that it's always a 4-year degree is required, but we do look for it because we are looking for signs of achievement. We're looking for people that have demonstrated an ability and a desire to grow and an ability and a desire to achieve. And an education does demonstrate that, even if it's in the wrong area that's not relevant to the job. That's why we're doing this training academy. We're taking people that are achievement oriented. Maybe they have a 4-year degree in biology, but they have an ability and a desire to grow their skill set and to grow their opportunities. So if you take that person and then you give them the right skills, then you create a really valuable employee. And I think there was a comment as well made about millennials. I'll tell you the experience that we're having at Cisco. And I think other tech companies, some are in the room, may agree or disagree, but turnover among millennials is very challenging. We recruit millennials, and then oftentimes they stay for a year or two and then they want to go somewhere else. We are not having that challenge with people with disabilities that are millennials. They tend to be a lot more loyal. So if we can help them develop the skills that lead to employment, they repay us in a way by being very loyal employees, and we don't have the same sort of turnover challenges that we typically have with millennials. So to sort of net it out, there's a lot more that can be done here, not just at Cisco, but across all employers. in developing this talent pool for real jobs and connecting the demand with the supply. And I think that really is the key. It's sort of the Rosetta Stone of this entire topic. While there's many challenges around disability employment, connecting supply and demand around a set of skills is one key way that we all can really make a big difference here, not only in our own companies, but on the global stage. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Pat. And we all believe that intersections is the right next step. I've seen question from here, Mr. Dien.
Okay, my name is Musharraf Hussain. I am from Action on Disability and Development, ADD International. It's a very good example from Cisco and also your development program from ILO. So we are talking about the disabled people who are educated, so they are working in company and so on. But we did not talk more about the poorest of the poor who don't have education, who are denied from going to school, and that is their below 10% of the poverty line ladder. So I think how we can reach to these people, and sometimes the whole package what Sujan told, even that is not sufficient. So we need to develop their skill, and we need to leg up. Because they need social protection for providing training. They cannot come because if they come to take the training, then they have to stop income. So I think we need support so that they can continue their training. And in Bangladesh, we work with the government sectors. Initially, they did not agree to recruit disabled people, and then we trained them, and 2 months they work as intern, and we had to pay their salary, and the disabled people proved that is they also can work. As Cisco told, they are better performer than others, the other colleagues. And then the government sector agreed to employ them. Even the network sent letter to all the companies so that they include disabled people. So I think we need to think about those people, how it can they have access to the labor market. And I have one question to ILO, because in UN General Assembly last year, even in this year, Secretary General, Director General is working for global deal. But I did not hear anything about disability in those forums. So this network is excellent, this promoting, but is it silo again, or disabled people are in the mainstream employment creation of ILO? I want to ask answer of this question.
If you have something to...
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, these are two very serious topics. I don't think I'll be the best person to speak about ILO/disability, but I can say with certainty that disabled people are at the core of ILO's work and mandate. And that's why we mainstream disability across our different lines of work, employment or gender promotion or public works. You know, we all have different streams of work, and disability is always, it cuts across our work. Now, how to assist people that are in the very low scale and under the poverty line, very hard to reach. Our experience from the employment side on how to support people in poverty, it cuts across different items. So many times governments, or when you have very hard to reach population, many times the solution is the promotion of entrepreneurship, for example. But many times it's overlooked the very basic services that these people need. As you mentioned, social protection. Sometimes safety nets are a way of creating that social protection as a start point. many times, just coming back to my point on entrepreneurship, many times we try to push these types of interventions so that young people can survive and make a living having a business. But many times we underlook the sustainability of those businesses, or perhaps whether we are indebting people by pushing them into businesses. So there are a lot of considerations that are critical to the ILO, and the quality of jobs is one of those. So making sure that, let's say, we have this space through safety nets, through the promotion of social dialogue that can also push companies and involve workers and trade unions associations into the delivery and the thinking of interventions that can support very disadvantaged people, including young people thinking about my field. I think I'll leave it there, and perhaps Stefano wants to add.
Thank you very much. I saw another hand raised at the end of the room.
Thank you. Erich Kofmel, Autistic Minority International. I'm taking a cue from the previous session on marketing, and I'd like to do some marketing for a very useful manual on autism in the workplace, which was written in 2014 by Janine Booth for the UK Trades Union Congress. And this is particularly useful because it is written by an actually autistic person herself, and so therefore from the perspective, from the first-hand insight of autistic people. And she makes one important point with regard to skills, that it is, she cautions against the over-reliance on diagnosis and functioning labels with regard to autistic people. It is unhelpful to make a distinction between low-functioning and high-functioning autistic people, because a person labeled low-functioning autistic may find that his or her skills and abilities are therefore overlooked, while a person labeled high-functioning autistic may find that his or her needs are overlooked equally. It is important, therefore, that each person on the autistic spectrum is recognized as an individual instead, and any skills are assessed from that point. So this manual is helpful, if you read it, for how to fully utilize the skills and abilities of autistic persons in the first labor market. And you can find it very easily if you just Google autism in the workplace, Trades Union Congress, autism in the workplace, Trades Union Congress. And I remind everyone that in addition to business and state members, trade unions are also a part of the tripartite system of the ILO. So I hope it is appropriate to make a bit of marketing for this very useful manual. Autism in the Workplace, Trades Union Congress. Please Google it. Share it with your autistic employees. Share it with corporate disability leads and disabled and non-disabled employees representatives in your companies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good advertising. Any final question or remarks in the room? Okay. So it's time to thank the panel. Thank you very much. We've learned a lot today, and before giving a proper closing, I would like to thank some people that are here in the room. Sign language interpretation as well as captioning. Thank you. The technical team that has been very hard to work today and has been challenged with digital, with online streaming, etc., etc. Thank you very much. And lastly, but not leastly, the ILO Global Business and Disability Network team, Stefan with Jürgen and Peter who are in the room, and some other that I have forgotten. So, thanks to you for attending, and now I have a very relevant task for all of you that are coming from the business world in the room. Next year, we're expecting you to bring a friend of yours that wasn't in the room already. Okay? So we won't have any spare room in the room next year because of your effort to bring new members within the network. For the national networks, we have a meeting tomorrow that will be pursuing the discussions and trying to tackle issues. How can things be made at national and regional level? Since we have a global business and disability network, you have network in the name. So it's time for networking. We wait for you to enjoy a coffee and network together. Thank you very much, everybody.
Just one final plea. Please don't go back to your place with our badges. We charge a lot of money for each badge, so don't ruin the GBDN budget by taking your badges back home. Please, Felipe will be there. Those of you who come tomorrow, keep them for tomorrow. Those of you who are leaving today, please give them back. Thank you.